10 takeaways. Off we go. Tricky week. Week 7 was a tricky week. Here's how you know it was tricky. Romeo Doubs was the leading receiver for the Packers. Yikes. Kyren Williams and Bigsby both went over 20 fantasy points. So they got there. They smashed. Players that aren't good scored a lot of fantasy points. And when that happens, it can be tilting. We're just going to say no to tilting. We're just saying no to L's. We're not taking L's. We're not saying we're sorry. I believe in the process. And we went through with some of these start-sit decisions. So oftentimes with this show, it's like, hey, we're going to victory lap on the starter stream show that we do at like 8 a.m. on Sundays. This past Sunday, 7:30 a.m. I'm not blaming the time that we started on some of the inaccurate forecasts for that starter stream show, but it wasn't the best. It wasn't our best starter stream, and we'll get into why and any of the learnings from that. We had some fantastic weeks. Like we can't discount and ignore some of these big, smashy performances that really helped to ease a lot of our minds. And I mean, I had full confidence in Jahmyr Gibbs all along. Dan Williamson and I talked about it. I said, no, Jahmyr Gibbs is the RB1 there. Look at just the touch distribution. Jahmyr Gibbs is getting carries. He's getting a carry share. If I asked you, what do you think Jahmyr Gibbs' carry share is, given the game script and how the scoreboard has looked week in, week out for the Lions, you would project fewer carries for Jahmyr Gibbs than what he actually had. Now, when they get into a shootout, when it's not a blowout, when, in this case, the Vikings score first, now all of a sudden it becomes a Jahmyr Gibbs week, not a David Montgomery week. So I understand why you play David Montgomery. Don't beat yourself up. We don't know how these games are going to play out, and that's part of how some of these performances played out. It was tilting. But Jahmyr Gibbs is an auto start every week. We know that. It's one of the best offenses. He's one of the best running backs in the league. And it was just very cool to see Jahmyr Gibbs at the top of the fantasy scoring, totally smashing, scoring touchdowns, looking like peak Alvin Kamara. It was a beautiful thing. So we need to start by celebrating Jahmyr Gibbs and celebrating Theo Greminger. I remember in the Kings Classic draft, it was painful for me to put that extra bid in to secure Jahmyr Gibbs, but he was like, no, we need Gibbs. Gibbs is he's a great guy to get in this particular format. In this auction right now, us securing Gibbs, this is a good value. We're going to be very happy. Trust me. We'll build around him. It'll be great. Okay. And we're doing great in that league. So I'm very happy. I have some Gibbs, and he's a very expensive running back. It's just stuff. You know me. More of an Aaron Jones guy. Aaron Jones, a warrior. I think that we need to celebrate Aaron Jones and Jahmyr Gibbs equally. They were in the same game. It was a great game, and Aaron Jones is a warrior. Aaron Jones was supposedly week to week. He broke all of my truisms about NFL injuries. I'm like 1,000 for 1,001. That's the scoreboard. And the one guy I've been wrong about with NFL injuries is Aaron Jones, because they said he was week to week, and he literally missed a week. I think it might have been. Was it their bye week? I think they missed a week. He missed a week. And then he's back. And I was like, wait a second, but I thought week to week means month to month. I thought we've established this. This has been true forever. And now, no, the one guy that's going to just put the sand in the gears is one Aaron Jones. The guy that I'm most heavily exposed to at running back. And I just thank you, Aaron. Just thank you. That doesn't mean I remember to put him in all my lineups. No. We can't go that far, right? It's like I remember to put him in a line. No. So yes, last week, week 6, was the Vikings bye week. I sometimes I think I remember things. You've been there. You think I remember things very well. I'm like, I think it was their bye week. I'm pretty sure it was their bye week. And then if we go back to week 5, Aaron Jones left that game with the injury. So, in fact, so far, yeah, I mean, he had 5 fantasy points in that game. The injury did hurt us as Aaron Jones managers. The injury hurt us. He just missed the bye week. This guy. Oh, my God. He was barely day to day, really. So we're celebrating Aaron Jones today. We're celebrating Jahmyr Gibbs. That's what we have to start. We're starting with the positive. Of course, start with the positive. Then we have to talk about Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is winning. Patrick Mahomes is just putting up a nice little W against a very difficult team, a rivalry, right? You could say this is a rivalry between the Chiefs and the 49ers, a cross-conference rivalry. And I think they just, they're like, oh, we'll just go ahead and come back in the fourth quarter, put up 14 points, and it's a wrap. And nice try. We're going to go on the road to Levi Stadium, and we're gonna put up the W. I'm only going to have like 150 yards, and it's not going to matter. Our offensive line, our defense, our special teams, everything is going to help to carry us. I still think Patrick Mahomes is a top talent, but if they don't need him, if they're losing in the fourth quarter and Kareem Hunt ultimately gets 22 attempts and Patrick Mahomes has 150 yards in a game they were losing in the fourth quarter on the road, right? They had more rush attempts than pass attempts. Okay, again, they were on the road. This is typically a situation. You go on the road to face the 49ers. You're going to throw more than you run. Almost always. And they didn't. Carson Steele even had 6 carries. There were 2 carries for Pirine. That's 30 running back carries to only 27 quarterback attempts. Now, Patrick Mahomes did pull it down, and he ran and scrambled, but you also had a Xavier Worthy carry. You had 2 Mecole Hardman carries. It was about, if you just looked at not pass attempts, but dropbacks, they were equivalent. And then the pass-to-run ratio skewed heavily to the run. So should you be panicking about Patrick Mahomes? Yeah, you should. Thankfully, he's so young in Dynasty. He has like 10 years left that you're not that worried in Dynasty. You're worried about winning the championship this year in Dynasty. It's going to be more difficult. In Superflex, at least, points are points at quarterback. But if you're in a single quarterback league in Dynasty and you built around Patrick Mahomes, first of all, shame on you. Shame on you for paying up at quarterback in a single quarterback league ever. So I think that's that. If you're in a Superflex league, then right? Yeah, you can't win them all. In Superflex, you're always thinking, my QB1 is going to lead the way, and then I'm going to get production from my QB2, and it'll get me there. Right? Ideally, I could smash at both quarterback positions, but as you can see, you never know. Right? You never know. So there, I think you're less panicked about. You're just saying, hey, I have Patrick Mahomes in Superflex. I'm not overthinking this. I'm happy, even in a seasonal league context. In Superflex, you're just going to keep playing him and hoping eventually that they get in a proper shootout where they have to throw. I mean, please. He was only 16 for 27, though. It wasn't like he was 22 for 27. He threw 2 picks. He looked bad. but I'm not worried. In Superflex, I'm not worried. So, wow. So I started by saying, yeah, you should be panicked. You should be panicked, but not panicked really. Really, if you're in Superflex, you're just bummed, not panicked. And if you're in a single quarterback league and you have Patrick Mahomes, then you probably should just be feeling bad about yourself and how you overpaid for quarterback. It's a lesson, right? If you're in a single quarterback league, there's plenty of options where you can go and acquire quarterback production inexpensively. I mean, there's always Anthony Richardson. You could always buy low on Anthony Richardson and see how that works out. I mean, so panic meter quarterbacks. There's quite a few panic meter quarterbacks. How many panic meter quarterbacks do we have in the NFL? So there was a panic meter. We were starting to think about pressing the panic meter on Caleb Williams. He pulled out of it. That's great. You're panicking about Justin Herbert. There's some panic there. If Will Levis somehow made it on your roster, then that's sort of beyond the panic button. That's just you're feeling a self-loathing that you fell for the banana in the tailpipe with the Will Levis. And it looks like, Anthony Richardson, right? He's a risky player. I get you had to play him. Maybe. Right? You had to play him maybe. Like, I have him. I drafted him highly. This is the problem with paying up for quarterback and single quarterback, that when they are active, even in a matchup you hate, you're like, well, I invested so much in this guy, and I've been waiting for him to be active, and now he's active. How can I not play him? And I thought that too during the Starter Stream show. I thought that. And then I looked at the quarterback rankings and I was like, oh, wait, he's not even in our top 12. Because normally the rushing quarterbacks, the quarterbacks with the especially if they could get you a rushing touchdown that week, you got to play them, right? But I was like, no, actually, this is not a good situation. It's not a good situation. This is like more of a Trey Sermon, Tyler Goodson game. They're at home against Tyler Huntley. Okay? And if there's one quarterback that's not going to be able to take advantage of the weakness of the Colts, is their outside perimeter corners, the one quarterback in the league, you're thinking, I don't think he could take advantage of this. I'm thinking about starting Tyreek Hill, but why is he not higher up in the player profile or projections this week? Well, this is why. Yeah, this is why. You have a Tyler Huntley problem and the Dolphins defense. So you're facing a stout defense and a quarterback that cannot fuel a shootout on his own. That's how the projection comes in lower than you would think. If it's like, oh, it's Anthony Richardson, he's always a top 10 play. He usually is. He usually is a top 10 play in the projections. It just wasn't this week because of the game environment that he was in. But certainly you were playing him over a bunch of other quarterbacks that are available. One of the quarterbacks that I was proud that we had ranked higher than Anthony Richardson. I was like, you know what you're doing? You're playing Geno Smith over Anthony Richardson this week. And process-wise, that was looking pretty strong. Going, again, on the road, not a home game, on the road to face the Falcons, just like Patrick Mahomes. You would think you're going on the road. You're not going to be able to run the balls successfully. We're going to need to drop back more, throw the ball more. And Geno Smith got the 2 touchdowns. Anthony Richardson was at home, and they could just lean on the running game. And he had 14 carries. Like, that's the one silver lining with Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson had 14 carries. That is the absolute dictionary definition. Maybe not dictionary. Maybe dictionary example or encyclopedia notation. It's the performance that you would point to say, this player has significant fantasy football upside in the moment now. Long term, this is not sustainable, and it's also terrifying. It's terrifying that he could get hurt. It's terrifying what this means for Anthony Richardson as a thrower of footballs. If they're going to have Michael Pittman active with a sore back, and they have Josh Downs, right? They had their full complement of receivers, and yet he's running the ball 14 times? This is like a college offense. They're not going to, they can't score. If you're running a college offense, if you're running the wishbone, if you're Army, you're not going to score as many points as Oklahoma with the spread attack, right? In up-tempo, we're starting 5 wide receivers with Baker Mayfield or maybe it's Texas Tech, it's Graham Harrell. Like, of course, that quarterback is going to, it's a pocket passer, but that pocket passer in that situation will outscore the mobile quarterback who's running the wishbone because there's just not enough plays. You're grinding too much clock and you're burning too many plays and you're just not able to provide the weekly volume that you would need to score the requisite fantasy points for this guy to be a top 10 play every week. So it's really an interesting, super interesting dilemma that you face. You love 14 carries. Anytime I tell you, oh my God, my fantasy quarterback had 14 carries. Wow, right? That's amazing. And, oh, they're using him in the red zone. Even better, right? But he completed 10 passes. And he had 8 total fantasy points. And he is a ticking time bomb for a shoulder injury, an ankle injury, an elbow injury, wrist injury. Think about all these different injuries that the super mobile quarterbacks sustain. It's absolutely terrifying to have. And if you don't feel like stomaching it, that's fine. You know, that is absolutely fine. A green light to just walk away from Anthony Richardson. You're looking at this box score going, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't do this. There's going to be weeks, man. He's going to have 30-point weeks. But this is not sustainable. This is not a player that I could see being a starting quarterback in the NFL in 5 years. It's just not. I close my eyes and I can't envision it. It doesn't make sense. So that's why in Dynasty, he's one of the more polarizing players in all of Dynasty, maybe the most. I mean, put it in the chat. Put it in the comments. Let me know who is more polarizing right now in fantasy football than Anthony Richardson. I mean, woof. Woof, 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 woof. And again, this is why we have these chats. This is why we have the comments. This is why I love recording live and not in a soundproof studio, right? Where it's it's totally sealed off from the world. I love this feedback. You all love it when I run through the injuries that happened on Sunday. And I forgot to do that. It was on my list of things to do, and I forgot because, again, when we're coming off a tilting weekend, the show sheet suffers, the show suffers, the organization of the show suffers, everything suffers. So we will run through the injuries now, starting with those that returned. David Montgomery hurt his knee. He came back. And that's it. Antonio Gibson hurt his knee. Not a lot of news about that. Stay tuned. Calvin Ridley had an ankle injury. Braxton Berrios had a knee injury. No one cares. Like a Hunter Bryant with his elbow injury. I'm sure it hurts a lot, but as fantasy gamers, it's hard to care. Jalen Hyatt. I'm sure there's some truthers out there that care that he hurt his ribs. I don't. We all care about the Jaden Daniels rib injury. Thankfully, no fractures were found in the x-rays. DK Metcalf hurt his knee. Juju Smith-Schuster re-injured a hamstring. Jordan Whittington re-injured a shoulder. Dawson Knox had a knee injury, and that could benefit Dalton Kincaid as well as the Curtis Samuel shoulder injury. Dorian Thompson-Robinson suffered a thumb injury. Jalen Polk had a head injury. You hate to see that. You hate the head injury. Now, in terms of season ending, we had Deshaun Watson with a ruptured Achilles. He's done for the year. And most sadly, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, Brandon Ayuk, the torn ACL, absolutely gut-wrenching. I mean, just as gut-wrenching as you could imagine. There were some illnesses that affected players. So during the Starter Stream show, there were questions about, do I start Kenneth Walker? Right? And I'm like, yes, you start Kenneth Walker. You're not benching Kenneth Walker. Okay? And whatever the question is about Kenneth Walker, you're playing Kenneth Walker. Have you ever heard of the flu game? Get out of here. Now, Kenneth Walker's Kenneth Walker. When you go to Player Profiler and you look at Kenneth Walker, you're like, okay, I think I know now why the Podfather is such a Kenneth Walker fan, because this is one of the badass players in the NFL. I mean, this guy will hurt you. Like if you're between him and the end zone, he's going to hurt you. Look at this guy. Look at him. No smile. That's a tough son of a bitch right there. That guy, he is not going to pause. He's not going to, if there's an injured player, like he's going to just run right over him, right? Because the end zone is there and he hasn't been tackled yet, and he is going to do whatever it takes. It doesn't matter. I love Kenneth Walker for that reason, and that was why I felt fine. I felt fine. He's sickness? You really think that's gonna? What does he care? Right? You just he'll get hooked up an IV, and he'll go out there and he'll eat faces. Right? It doesn't matter. But then you hear, oh well, Deebo Samuel, they really needed him, and he was sick. And then you're like, oh, what happened to my Demario Douglas? I had Demario Douglas with a potential smash week against Jacksonville. Look what he did last week. He was the clear alpha for Drake May, and it's like you're barely hearing from Demario Douglas. Like, I think some of these illnesses that are going around the NFL are more serious than they've been in years past. So I think that we're gonna heed the illness designation with a bit more seriousness over the next few weeks, because I mean, Deebo was not Deebo. Demario Douglas was not Demario Douglas. And I think even Kenneth Walker wasn't Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker, in that situation, typically Kenneth Walker goes for like 100 yards. So, I mean, he got there because that's what Kenneth Walker does. But what could have been had he not had this illness? We'll see. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But I'm not done talking about the Chiefs. Right, so it all started. We started this. I don't know how this happens, but we started this whole conversation talking about, are we panicking about Patrick Mahomes? And then it became about, well, we really should be panicking about Anthony Richardson. And then next thing you know, we're 20 minutes in, and I've like 2 takeaways out of like 200 that I have listed. And so we're looking at another hour show for sure. And we're going to get into the remaining takeaways. A lot more takeaways to come after this. Oh, every week I'm answering these start-sit questions on Sunday morning. I go to the weekly rankings on playerprofiler.com just to make sure that my instincts are correct, and sometimes they're not. And guess what? More often than not, I go with the projections. You may not feel great about starting Daniel Jones or Wan'Dale Robinson, but the projections say, hey, that's the move. It may not feel right, but you use those projections to get it right. That's the power of the Player Profiler system. It's Evan Ringler, it's Bradley Stalder, it's Theo Greminger, of course, it's Billy Muzio making these rankings possible. The season rankings, so you know who to pick up, who to trade for. The Dynasty rankings are part of this. The offensive line rankings from Dan Fornick, one of the best in the business. Then we get our cornerback rankings, which show which corners are matched up with which wide receivers. And now, in collaboration with the IDP show, we have IDP rankings. Did you know that? Did you? So go to playerprofiler.com, use promo code PODFATHER, Get you 25% off the player rankings package right now at playerprofiler.com. Enjoy! So, I'll get right to my position on Xavier Worthy. He is one of the streaming buy lows of my lifetime. He 4x'd the target share of the next receiver for the Chiefs, Mecole Hardman. And you just heard from the injury rundown, we had Juju Smith-Schuster re-injuring a hamstring. Okay, so that's the second injury to the hamstring. This is, according to the Injury Finder app, and when that algorithm runs, when you see that re-injury, it's almost exponentially more severe in terms of probability of missing yet more games with lower body injuries as the season plays out. It's a very difficult thing to come back from. It's more difficult than, say, what Jordan Whittington's going through, where he re-injures a shoulder. And this was a legitimate cause for concern. So we had these three players that I believed on the Start Stream show. So the Starter Stream show on Sunday wasn't my best, but we certainly, discussed issues that manifested as the afternoon played out. Jordan Whittington re-injured his shoulder. Juju re-injured his hamstring. And I was also worried about Jordan Mason re-injuring his shoulder. So all three of those players were risky plays this week, and none of them got there, and two of them ended up getting re-injured. Xavier Worthy is going to have big boom weeks. He is going to put up a Tyreek Hill level performance soon, very soon. So if you have a need at receiver, there's no one better to target than Xavier Worthy. I think the next best target is Tank Dell. We'll talk about Tank Dell in a little bit. Tank Dell dropped a touchdown. He was out of bounds on another play that would have been a touchdown, but there was a penalty. Stroud had no passing yards. Stroud had under 100 passing yards. I don't remember the exact amount of passing yards. It was something it was shocking. I looked up and I was like, wait, CJ Stroud has 86 passing yards. Really? Okay, so Diggs can't get there. No one can get there if that's how many passing yards Stroud's going to have. So that's just a mulligan. What's maddening is this was a shootout game environment on the road. Again, that's when you want to play more receivers on the road, and you lean running back when you're at home. Like, okay, this is not necessarily going to be a mix-in week. It was a mix-in week, of course, because it's always a mix-in week. But this might not be a mix-in week this time because they're on the road. And there goes C.J. Stroud for 86 yards. And they lose, right? They lose. They thought, oh, wow, we can just run Mixon and we'll run the clock out. And turns out, no. Turns out the Packers had other ideas in the second half. And if you squander opportunities to score in the first half because you're too busy running the ball, like this is the classic sort of a hindsight biased criticism of Kyle Shanahan, Matt Ryan, and the Falcons against the Patriots. Oh, they just should have run the ball. They just should have sat on it. No, what they actually should have done is execute some of those pass plays that they just couldn't, right? They just couldn't. When you have the opportunity to score, need to score. Now, that's a very different situation, right? You're up 28-3. That's a much stronger case to just say, let's run the clock out. I mean, the Texans were up at the half, 19-14, right? So running Joe Mixon 25 times against that team has risks, and the risk is that they squeak it out at the end with a field goal, and that's exactly what happened. Right, you're begging the other team to squeak it out, and they do. So that was a game plan issue, and just bad luck. I mean, drops like Tank. It's not like Tank Dell has shaky hands. It's just bad luck. But it was a bad luck game while Nico Collins is on the IR during this month short-term IR stretch. Nico's going to be back in a few weeks. So these weeks for Tank Dell were so precious, and for him to bagel, it was just, That's why Xavier Worthy's a better buy low right now. They're both buy lows. They're both top buy lows, but Worthy definitely the top buy low that I've seen in recent memory. And finally, looking at the 49ers, I mean, everything is teeing up for George Kittle. George Kittle, who is essentially a younger version of Travis Kelce and Rob Gronkowski. So just looking at the metrics, and I'm not just talking about like size and explosiveness, athleticism. I'm talking about like yards after the catch, yards per route run, all these metrics we've had over the years. And you look at Gronkowski, you look at Kelce. If they had a baby, his name would be George Kittle. And now George Kittle's in the situation where Debo's had a disappointing season. There's no more Ayuk. The San Francisco defense is a shell of its former self. George Kittle is going to be the tight end one this year now that we had this Ayuk injury, and that's going to push Brock Bowers all the way down to tight end 2 because Brock Bowers, again, was the leading receiver. He's a receiver playing tight end. We have a receiver playing tight end, and we just have the ultimate two-way tight end in Kittle and Bowers and Kittle. We're going to look up at the end of the season. We're going to be so used to these guys just cranking out multi-touchdown performances, 10-target games. We're not going to remember a world where Sam Laporta was the first tight end drafted, like where people were selecting Mark Andrews and just a long list of tight ends ahead of superstars like Brock Bowers and George Kittle. And Brock Bowers and George Kittle are the reason why you take shots on tight end and you don't draft a top 5 tight end, because you can take shots. You can take shots and just maximum contingent upside. I know, Theo, that we talked about this Kings Classic team. We did that. We went Njoku and Bowers. So we and this week we played one of them in flex. That was the beauty of it. And so anyone that went a bully tight end strategy like that with Kittle and Bowers, I mean, that was the absolute nuts, especially with all these other tight ends like Travis Kelce underperforming. But with Brandon Ayuk, my God, man. My God. This is what he was worried about. This was what he was afraid of. This is why he didn't want to report to camp. This was why he was trying to get the hell out of there. He wanted a long-term deal so bad. Begging his agent, please do whatever it takes. I'll go anywhere except New England. As it turns out, he should have taken the deal. He should have taken the deal with New England. He should have taken any deal, would have been better. He probably cost himself. I mean, put it in the chat, put it in the comments. How much did he cost himself? What, $20 million? A lot of money. He's so furious. So what's the over-under on the home accessories that Brandon Ayuk broke, right? Or is about to break when he gets back from the hospital, right? There's going to be some destruction in his house. And it would be me too. I would be breaking things. So I've never been as mad as I'm sure Brandon Ayuk is right now. And, search your heart, search your soul. Have you ever been as mad as Brandon Ayuk is, having lost this much money? I mean, how many people in this audience have lost as much money as Brandon Ayuk just lost? But it's not like he just lost it. Oh, bad luck. I tore my ACL and it's football. No. He saw this coming. He was trying to avoid this. He was bending his will to avoid this for months and months. And the thing he was worried about happened. That's heartbreaking. That's the definition of heartbreaking. But then on the other end, you say, hey, Tua Tagovailoa, the thing that everyone was most worried about with him, turns out he's going to be cleared. He's going to play. He's going to play sooner than potentially expected. And we need him. We really need him. We really need him. Now, is it in his long-term benefit to play football? Probably not. Is this his passion and his purpose? Yes. So again, a tricky situation. Tricky situation. You know this could shorten your life, but it is your singular passion and purpose. What do you do? Right? You know you lose millions if you play and tear your ACL. What do you do? How hard do you push to not report and be a difficult player? It's a dilemma that Brandon Ayuk faced, and now he's second-guessing himself. I hope and pray that Tua doesn't second-guess this, but as fantasy gamers, some of us have Jalen Waddle, a lot of Jalen Waddle. We really need him. Like, we really need him. I apologize. I want to say this into the camera to Tua. I said you were overrated. I even made fun of you for being left-handed. Steve Young was left-handed. I apologize. Please come back. Please. Please, we really, really need you. You know, like Tyreek Hill had 1 fantasy point. Jalen Waddle had 2 fantasy points. Devon Achane, what did he have? 8. It was something incredibly demoralizing. The only player that got there on the Dolphins was Jonnu Smith. Okay, so Achane had 9 fantasy points. Let's add it up. 9 fantasy points for Achane, 1 for Hill, and 2 for Waddle. 12 fantasy points total between them. And it's a reminder that you have a quarterback downgrade affects the running game as well. And it trickles all the way down. Raheem Mostert, useless. And those of us that have been stockpiling all the Jalen Wright as a top handcuff, now Jalen Wright is 3rd in line for one of the league's worst offenses at the moment. So then the question is, well, do I drop Jalen Wright? And it just depends on who's available. I can tell you that I'm now considering dropping Jalen Wright, and I'm considering dropping Braylon Allen. We'll talk about Breece Hall in a little bit, but Breece Hall is the poster child for why coaching matters. There are particular situations in the NFL where coaching is going to matter, and determining touch distribution, who's playing, who's not playing, that's in the coach's hands. That's the one thing that they have total power over, and that's the thing that we can be impacted most by as fantasy gamers. So Jalen Wright and Braylon Allen have now fallen behind Ty Chandler, Roschon Johnson, Trey Benson, Kamani Vidal, Blake Corum, Isaac Garendo, Jalen Warren, obviously Ray Davis. Oh, we'll get into Ray Davis a little bit later. You might even put Kenny Gainwell. You might even put Carson Steele. There's now a lot of running backs that are options, second options, that you might slot in ahead of Jalen Wright and ahead of Braylon Allen when you're deciding how to stockpile handcuffs on your bench at this time of the year. But we also know that Tua will return at some point, and Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane are incredibly fragile. For that reason, I would rank Jalen Wright still ahead of Braylon Allen. Braylon Allen is now just a baseline handcuff where even if something happens to Breece Hall, okay, now he's in some rotation with Davis. Like he's in a 60-40 split with Davis for an offense that has a very difficult time scoring. Right? So one of the worst offensive lines, a quarterback that is struggling. It's a bad situation in New York, and you don't have like the Tua Tagovailoa parachute coming down from the sky. But hey, If you started Jonnu Smith, you're happy. Right? And that was Dan Williamson. Dan Williamson comes on the show, and he's like, you know who I like at tight end? Jonnu Smith. And I'm like, well, Dan, this week against the Colts, they tend to get shredded by outside receivers, and it's Tyler Huntley. Hey. All hail Dan Williamson. All hail Theo Greminger, because we have a very popular bold predictions video that we put up on YouTube every week. Did like over 10,000 views 2 weeks ago, over 5,000 views last week. Theo Greminger, he knows things, said David Njoku is going to be the leading receiver for the Browns this year. Oh, golf clap. But that's really where coaching matters, is just the opportunity breakdown. Who is going to be getting the snaps? Who is going to be getting the opportunities? Breece Hall, 21 opportunities. All of the running backs, carries plus targets, 4. So, offensive efficiency, pace of play doesn't matter right now. If you're getting 90% of the running back opportunities, then you're going to be a massive fantasy scorer. And then if you're also one of the most explosive playmakers at the position, you're going to be a massive fantasy scorer. You're going to get there. So, I mean, if you drafted Breece Hall, this was everything you could have wanted. The coaching change. The ceiling is a little lower for Breece Hall than it is for Bijan Robinson because that offense is so anemic. But it's very good news. I mean, those were some dark days a couple weeks ago for Bijan Robinson and Breece Hall fantasy managers. I'm still very happy that I drafted Amon-Ra St. Brown everywhere instead of these guys, even A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. I'm very happy with all those rosters where it sidestepped those running backs, in all first-round running backs. Just be like, no, thanks. Maybe at the turn we'll go Saquon Barkley. That's about it. Mike Tomlin's one of the best coaches in the league. And when Mike Tomlin says we're going to Russell Wilson, that really matters. That carried a lot of weight with me. I was like, okay, there's something wrong here. We were celebrating Justin Fields like 2 weeks ago. And Dave Kluge and I were like, man, the Bears really should have got more. They really, that was a sell low moment. Ryan Poles, shame on you. And now it's like, well, actually, Ryan Poles maybe looks vindicated here, because Steelers offense looked as good as it's looked all year with Russell Wilson. And I think most NFL fans, most fantasy gamers thought that Russell Wilson was washed. So this is another tip of the cap to Mike Tomlin there. You have Pickens going over 100 yards. Pickens is like, look at this. I'm getting a little volume. I'm putting up 100 yards. Yeah, baby. Najee Harris is like, hell yeah, man. I'm rushing for 100 yards. It's like, this is pretty cool, right? Whereas Justin Fields was sucking a lot of the oxygen out of the offense. He was scoring fantasy points, but in general, sucking the oxygen out of the offense. That's also happening with Anthony Richardson. Stay tuned for that. And whenever you see a coach say, I understand that we're paying running back X, and I also understand that running back X is big and it looks like a prototypical bell cow back, I don't care. We're going to play the explosive kid, the small guy, Mike McDaniel with Devon Achane. That was, less brave because the other back on the roster was Raheem Mostert, also small, and Devon Achane had the draft capital. So that wasn't, that brave. But to give Achane the workload that McDaniel has so far this year and so far in his career, that's impressive. Not a lot of coaches would do that. And you look at in what's happening in New York, I was very concerned that Devin Singletary comes back and then he's motor and he's team leader, captain, and he's going to slot right back in as the primary back, and then Tyrone Tracy's going to be an afterthought. Theo disagreed with me. And again, Theo right again. Right? I am happy to cede the ground to Dan Williamson and Theo Greminger. If we can get Tyrone Tracy unlocked, I'm here for it. So Tyrone Tracy had more targets and more carries than Devin Singletary. This could be because Devin Singletary wasn't 100%. So we're not there yet with Tyrone Tracy. Certainly he wasn't a guy you could start. I know there were people there in the starter stream show. Start Tyrone Tracy, deep leagues. I was like, not yet, man. Not yet. This is not a great matchup, and we need to see, does Brian Daboll have the guts to play him over Devin Singletary? And he did. So that was great news. You saw this also in Indianapolis where Tyler Goodson is playing significant snaps. Tyler Goodson, the one who's delivering the explosive runs, scoring the touchdown. Trey Sermon is a slug. Zach Moss is a slug. The fact that it takes this long for Chase Brown to log more snaps than Zach Moss is an embarrassment. And so whenever you see a coach quick to act to insert the smaller, more explosive playmaker at running back, that is one of the strong signals in the NFL that, hey, we have an above average coach on our hands here. This is good. I have pretty strong convictions myself about certain players, but I don't hate players. I hate ADPs, and there are situations where a player that I don't think is any good or I think is grossly overrated, there are situations that come up, and I'm always looking for these situations where that player, hey, this player is a value. I have not, to my knowledge, found that point with Calvin Ridley. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. Please let me know in the chat. I would love to know if I was out here touting Calvin Ridley at any point. I would love to know. I don't remember, but I've said a lot, and I've tweeted a lot, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I did say, oh, no, Calvin Ridley's a great value here. No, I don't think so. Pretty sure I didn't. Not with Calvin Ridley. But others I have. Like, for example, this past weekend, said I kind of think Jerry Jeudy is interesting, right? Jerry Jeudy, just on the law of the conservation of targets, pretty interesting. When they move to Jameis Winston. So you need to have two things happen. If we lose Cooper to trade and we lose Deshaun Watson to a benching, or in this case, a ruptured Achilles, green light to acquire Jerry Jeudy, play Jerry Jeudy. I'm in, right? Just guy reaches his late 20s, has been overrated his entire career. And what's the common denominator between those two? Alabama. Went to Alabama. Crimson Tide. Oh, yeah. Overrated. And yet, no. And yet, Calvin Ridley's going to Calvin Ridley. Jerry Jeudy's going to Jerry Jeudy. Calvin Ridley went 3 of 9. Jerry Jeudy was just, what was Jerry Jeudy's catch rate this past week? Was it 20%? Am I being generous? Embarrassing. Whatever it was embarrassing. Cedric Tillman showing a pulse. Jerry Jeudy was 1 for 5. 20%. Bingo! But we have a finger injury for Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who was interesting for a minute there. Jameis Winston, the emergency third quarterback, that's because, so everybody knows this, it's not because Dorian Thompson-Robinson's better, it's because the Browns were 1-5 and they want the number 1 draft pick. And sadly, by putting Jameis Winston in there, Jameis Winston's going to give them a better chance to win than Dorian Thompson-Robinson. So I understand the logic of like, hey, we've got to lose games here. So let's get the backup of the backup in there. Let's flip the depth chart accordingly. Let's keep playing the starter because he's the worst quarterback we have, Deshaun Watson. So that's the easiest way to lose, right? Just play Deshaun Watson. But now it is the Jameis Winston show, and it's the David Njoku show. Tillman is interesting. Elijah Moore, interesting. Of all those receivers, Elijah Moore is the best all-around receiver on this team, other than David Njoku, who's a tight end. I'm intrigued. And I think in the deep leagues, Elijah Moore is available. He's worth stashing. If you need wide receiver help, or if you wanted to stream a receiver because you're in desperate straits, Elijah Moore is interesting. Don't forget about Elijah Moore. I have conviction that Elijah Moore is better than Jerry Jeudy. And we're going to play this out till the end. We're going to play this out to the end of their career. I'm not going to take any L's, and we're going to run the clock out on Jerry Jeudy, just like I've been running the clock out on Calvin Ridley. And I'm feeling pretty damn good about Calvin Ridley. Pretty damn good. The take started with DJ Moore better than Calvin Ridley. They were drafted, same draft slot, same draft. DJ Moore, far superior to Calvin Ridley. That's looking better and better and better. But it took years. So it's not easy, man. It's not easy to sit in this chair. I got to invest years and years and years to finally come back and say, told you so. Told you so. Just like right now. Think about what's happening right now. Kyren Williams. Tank Bigsby. Right? They're top running backs in week 7 with no targets. No targets for Kyren Williams. No targets for Tank Bigsby. No problem. Tank Bigsby has like 2 targets in 2 games. Not even. I think he has 1 target in 2 games. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. Now, Tank Bigsby, he's not a slug. I may have called him a slug at one point. He's not Trey Sermon. Okay? He's definitely not. Okay? So, I just want to be clear. We have player profiler for a reason. Okay? Look at Tank Bigsby. Look at this guy. He has a 74th percentile speed score. This is not a slug running back. This is a guy who can break a long run and score a touchdown. He has that capability. I mean, Damian Harris is the perfect comp for him. That is a good but not great running back. He's not just a guy. I wouldn't call him just a guy. Trey Sermon's a guy. I wouldn't call him a guy. He's fine. He's good, not great. He's not anyone I'm overpaying for. He's not anyone I'm excited to start. Okay? The danger in starting him this past week was, what if Drake May is the real deal? What if Drake May makes this a shootout and it actually is a D'Ernest Johnson game, not a Tank Bigsby game? Turns out Drake May's a rookie, and the Patriots are trying to lose every game. And as bad as Jacksonville has looked, they're not nearly as bad as the Patriots. I mean, it was a sort of a weird situation where they're at Wembley. So it's like no one's really at home, both on the road. I mean, they're punting a home game. Jacksonville's saying we don't even going to have a home game. But how do they get this huge lead? They scored 22 points in the second quarter on a punt return. Right? This is how you get there. If you're a between the tackles grinder, ideally you're at home, you're playing against an inferior offense, and your team scores on defense or on special teams, and then you're up 20 points in the second half. That's how a guy like Tank Bigsby gets there. That is a narrow range. Tank Bigsby has a narrow range. You saw the week prior, nothing, right? Nothing. Outscored by D'Ernest Johnson, because that's a more common game scenario that the Jacksonville Jaguars, that are now 2-5, that they're going to face. So congratulations. You played Tank Bigsby. You better have. What I always say to people on the Starter Stream show is, this is as good. If this is as good as the matchup is going to get, you play the player or you drop him. If you're not going to play Jordan Whittington this week, drop him. That was, we did this whole monologue about this on the podcast, on the My Dimension podcast last week. Why are you stashing these types of receivers? If you're not going to play them in the best case situation when there's no Cooper Kupp, drop them. If you're going to pick up Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne is out, of course you're playing him against the Patriots. Otherwise, you're never going to play him. Drop him. Drop him. Now, the question was, do I play him over Kenneth Walker? No. I know Kenneth Walker has an illness, but you don't play him over Kenneth Walker. Now, did he outscore Kenneth Walker? Technically. But that's a process I'm fine with. Okay. You did it. You a clear and obvious play that had some risk. There was some risk that the game flow is not what was projected, and that Drake May is better than advertised. And it turns out the thing is, Drake May is better than advertised. Like, permission to get excited about Drake May. If you're a Patriots fan like me, this is a very exciting time, right? And we're going to be going back to Demario Douglas, because this also tells me that Demario Douglas is going to have more weeks, just like Hunter Henry's going to have more weeks, because they're going to be playing from behind all year. And Drake May, he can be prolific. So I'm more excited about Drake May than I am Tank Bigsby. How about that? And in the long run, Tank Bigsby is a sell. If you're not trying to put Tank Bigsby on the block right now, if you're not trying to trade him right now in Dynasty, if you have him, you're doing it wrong. You're all kinds of wrong. Right? What else did we actually get right? So we got Wan'Dale Robinson. I know a lot of people wanted to play Wan'Dale. Like, okay, Neighbors is back. And I know that Wan'Dale's getting targets, but they're not down the field at all. This is not a week to play Wan'Dale. He had 9 targets for 26 yards. This is not the week to play Josh Downs. You're not playing Josh Downs if it's Anthony Richardson under center. Okay? There's a lot of people wanted to play Josh Downs. That's like, what? No. A lot of people wanted to play Christian Watson. Christian Watson, classic point chasing, especially once Wicks was active. Now you're really chasing it with Christian Watson. He is boom bust. But there's so many options, including Romeo Doubs, unfortunately. It's an unfortunate truth that we have to deal with Romeo Doubs. That you can't start Christian Watson with any kind of confidence. I'd much rather start a guy like Darnell Mooney. Process-wise, I know Darnell Mooney scored more fantasy points, but it was simply a much better process because the targets are more consolidated in Atlanta, and they projected to score just as many, if not more, points. They actually had a higher implied point total. So keep going back to Darnell Mooney every week, and don't just go back to Christian Watson just because there's upside there. His probability of hitting a ceiling outcome, very thin, much wider possibility for Darnell Mooney to get there. So Darnell Mooney's a classic player that I would go back to. You're going back to Xavier Worthy. You're going back to Darnell Mooney. You're going back to Tank Dell this coming week, assuming they don't have a bye or and some other unfortunate event befalls them. Many wanted to play Jordan Addison as well. And again, Jordan Addison, similar to Wan'Dale Robinson, similar to these slot receivers that have the low target depth. Now, Jordan Addison, he did get the 50-yard heave, like he reeled it in, late fourth quarter, desperation, 50 yards to save the day. But up until that point, and even when you check the box score when it was all over, Jalen Naylor is the equal of Jordan Addison. I'm not clear on who's better between Addison and Naylor. And there's going to be a lot of fantasy points coming out of this offense. Now, Hawkinson's back soon. So it's all these guys are going to get pushed down. Addison is a raging sell. Okay? Of all these players, Addison is a sell. I mean, he wasn't impressive this week, but he wasn't a guy to start, and he's a sell. Just based on the dichotomy of he and Naylor, just shows that you can't do it. You can't do it. So, Bigsby, a sell for sure. I think that's the sell of all sells. I can't think of a better sell. Anyone else come up with a better sell? I can't think of one than Tank Bigsby. Kyren Williams, maybe? So, Kyren Williams, this is a fun one. Kyren Williams is the anti-explosive. He's getting there on just pure volume. He gets the touchdown or touchdowns every week, it seems. And, he can't get to 4 yards a carry. He's stuck at 3.8 yards a carry right now. And we have this new metric that I want to show you called EPX. So let's take a look at this. Look at EPX. The Kyren Williams EPX. He's essentially last in explosive play rating, which is the EPX metric. He's not good. So that's just very clear. So if there is absolutely no chance that you're ever going to get me to take the L on Kyren Williams, none. There's no chance. You keep trying. Please, on social media, please continue to try to get me to take the L on Kyren Williams. This is the prime example of a player I'm going to run the clock out on. And I'm just going to say sell, 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 sell. And it's not that a broken clock is right twice a day. That's not what it's going to be. It's going to be that this was the right advice all along. And whatever you could have gotten through this whole time period, it was the right move, because you never know when Sean McVay is finally going to realize, oh, Blake Corum is better. They have analytics professionals that work for the Rams that have access to player profile. This isn't like secret dossier that you hand to a general manager or a head coach. This is publicly available information. And there are individuals that work at these teams. I've talked to them, and they are gathering information from player profile, and they're handing it to the coach. And eventually the coach is going to realize Corum gives us a better chance to win. It may not happen this week. It may not happen next week. It's going to happen. And the value is going to crash. Now, you could say in hindsight, oh, you sold too early. But the probability that you actually sell at the pinnacle of value with a stock, of a player, whatever it is, it's a vanishingly small probability. Just take the value, bank the fantasy points you've already scored and accrued with Kyren Williams. Now go ahead and flip that player for a first-round pick, for a wide receiver that actually has long-lasting production capabilities. So, yeah, I tried to say Tank Bigsby is a better sell than anyone else in the league. That's not true. Tank Bigsby is not the best sell in the league. It's actually Kyren Williams. Keon Coleman was interesting. I think Keon Coleman, right? Went over 100 yards. Sell, right? Go back and look at the game. It was a busted coverage. Amari Cooper was a strong start. Now, many on Sunday were worried about starting Amari Cooper. Just like they were worried rightfully about starting Devontae Adams without being acclimated and having many reps. Again, Davante Adams was actually less of a concern because he's spent so many years with Aaron Rodgers. But my argument on Sunday was Amari Cooper is a perfect skill match for Josh Allen, and he makes other players better. You saw the 100% catch rate for Khalil Shakir. You saw Keon Coleman finally putting up an impressive game. It's sort of like when you add a left tackle, and then the left tackle that was outmatched at left tackle gets to move to right tackle, and then he can have success there, and then the right tackle can move inside, and then the whole offensive line is so much better, greater than the sum of its parts, just by upgrading the left tackle, by upgrading the alpha receiver, and finally giving Josh Allen a weapon he can always find open whenever he's scrambling around, because the Amari Cooper-Josh Allen skill match is such beautiful harmony, because it's so harmonious, because Josh Allen is not a timing-based quarterback, and Amari Cooper is not a timing-based receiver. Amari Cooper is out there in the moment improvising, right? If Amari Cooper was a guitarist, he would love the guitar solo, and he's much more of a jam band guitar player. He's not a session player. You don't hire Amari Cooper to be a session guitarist for the Goo Goo Dolls. You don't. You hire Amari Cooper to go out and just shred for 10 minutes without having a plan. Okay, Amari Cooper runs routes without a plan often because he's reading the cornerback and he's running a lot of option routes. He doesn't know if he's breaking inside or outside until he sees that corner and sees how his hips are swiveling, and then he decides he's going to do a little shoulder fake, or he's going to do a jab step, and then he's going to break the other way. That's how Amari Cooper gets such great separation at the top of the route. But that also means that these West Coast offenses that are so predicated on 3-step drops, boom, boom, throw, boom, boom, throw, boom, boom, throw. Amari Cooper's going to be there. Amari Cooper's going to... He doesn't want to be there. That's not his strength. He might be over there. It's a bad fit to put him with a timing-based pocket passer. You put him with another improvisational quarterback, another improvisational player. Now you've got two guitarists that are both working off each other. Now we've got Leonard Skinner. That's what you're getting with Josh Allen and Amari Cooper is Leonard Skinner. It's beautiful music because I don't know where I'm going to throw. You don't know where you're going to go. I'm going to drop back and survey, and there you are. You're open. Bang. You're not open. I'll start scrambling. Oh, there's Shakir. Bang. Oh, I'll loft it up for Coleman. He's got the safety bit up on Amari Cooper. So now Coleman's open. It's great. It's great for Josh Allen. It's great for everyone in this offense. The addition of Amari Cooper. It was a masterstroke. It was actually a better addition. Will have a more positive impact on the Bills trading for Amari Cooper than the Jets trading for Davante Adams, because there's only so much you can get out of Aaron Rodgers. Josh Allen has the most potential of any quarterback in the league, and helping him unlock some of that potential is a windfall for the offense. There's no windfalls available for Aaron Rodgers. It's just you're incrementally improving the outcomes, but it's not this giant win that is Amari Cooper to the Bills. Amari Cooper to the Bills, unbelievable. I'm so happy for him. I'm so happy for Josh Allen. I'm so happy for Bills fans. Bills fans, I talked to Bills fans. They said that team didn't even play well, and they crushed the Titans. And this leads me to my final point, my final takeaway. There's a particular player that I talked briefly about and mentioned his name a few minutes ago, or at this point, an hour ago. And he's on the Bills. And things are setting up for this player to be a league winner, to be the rookie running back you drafted in the double-digit rounds that we were stashing religiously. Said this is it's Corum, it's Algier, it's this guy. It's Ray Davis. So the under-the-radar winner of this Amari Cooper trade is Ray Davis, for all the reasons that Devon Achane is struggling. Ray Davis will benefit. Now, there's a number of ways that Ray Davis can hit. Ray Davis can hit just by outperforming James Cook, as he did in Week 7. Or, because James Cook is undersized, James Cook could suffer another injury. Shoulder injury, for example. Right? You see these smaller running backs, they more often suffer these shoulder injuries. It's also interesting that Ray Davis, being bigger than James Cook, also a better receiver. He out-targeted Cook in Week 7. He outgained Cook on the ground in Week 7. Look at the blowouts that Buffalo has teed up. They play the aforementioned New York Jets, who are struggling. They play the Miami Dolphins, who are struggling. And they also play the New England Patriots, who are trying to finish last in the league. So for a lot of reasons, my number one ad right now, who am I trying to target and trade? Who am I just trying? Bend your will to get Ray Davis on your roster in fantasy football. From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the host, the research they do, the production costs? Go to playerprofiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.